trying to brand him as racist.
He's whipping up hatred to scapegoat a minority religious group, which has some very dangerous historic precedents, as you might agree. I mean, it's the kind of behavior that it's classic demagoguery, and you know he's going to get somebody hurt.
This is just terrible. You have a presidential candidate who is deliberately stoking fear and smearing a whole population of people.
Of course, Mr. Trump denies any racial animus, and I've known him for 25 years. I've never seen that out of him. Nevertheless, the issue is in play. With us, Dana Perino, co-host of The Five. So the strategy, as far as I see it, and I told this to Mr. Trump last night, is that they're trying to, they being the left and the Democrats, are trying to brand him as a racist guy, all right, for his comments on Mexicans, his comments on Muslims. He retweeted, as he pointed out to me, the black statistics on crime, which were incorrect. And then, by extension, they're trying to sell the fact that all Republicans are racist. Do you see it that way?
It's certainly true, because this is their playbook from the early 60s,
right.
And for any Republican, which is why I've always held the rule that Republicans start in a credibility deficit, especially on race. And so you have to work your way up just to get to neutral. And one of the dangerous things is, if you're trying to communicate to a broad audience, multiple audience, and you're running a national election, is that if you give them ammunition with which to hit you, it's hard then to crawl up out of that hole and get to neutral.
But here's the difference between Donald Trump and all the other politicians. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
He does not care. He's made it quite clear that he wants to deport all illegal aliens. And a new poll from Fox today shows that majority of Americans, over 50%, agree with that. Deport them all. All right, he doesn't care if Muslims are offended by surveillance, special surveillance for them. Doesn't care. All right. So while he may not have personal racial animus, and I'm the guy, never saw anything like that. All right, his policies can be defined that way by the opposition, and I don't know whether he even cares about that.
Well, he might not care if he thinks that he's able to win that way. I don't know if it's a good way to think about winning a general election. But to the point about the Republican Party, the unfavorables for the Republican Party are about 55%, right? It's got a 35% approval rating in the country. So right now, it's hard to get any worse. And so I don't know what is happening overall. I mean, perhaps Pew will come back next year and say, maybe because of Donald Trump, the Republican Party brand is now more favorable. I kind of find that hard to believe.
But, you know, in an era where we're seeing President Obama collapse, and he is, the presidency's collapsing before the public's eyes. And the public acknowledges that in the polling. All right? It's collapsing. That the Republican Party should be the big victor, but it isn't right now anyway.
Right. When President Obama was overseas talking about refugees, the first thing he did was attack Republicans. And he gave them no credence to think that maybe we should just have a pause. If you look at the difference between Trump on refugees and Paul Ryan, who's actually in a position of governing at least right now, what he did was he was able to say, look, let's have a reasonable response. Let's have some common sense. We're going to have a pause. And what was he able to do? He got 76 Democrats to vote with him, despite President Obama's ill-thought-out veto.
But Trump knows the only way he's going to win, excuse me, the nomination is to throw bombs and to be the anti-politician. So he knows that. He can't moderate these positions because then his chances of winning the nomination would fall, right?
Well, they're unpersuasive to me, and I think to maybe a lot of other Republicans, but
he's ahead.
He has tapped into a vein of people that are frustrated. And I actually put that back on President Obama. I think the incompetence and the lack of leadership and a feeling across America like, what are you doing? What happened to our country? And they see someone like Trump who is the opposite.
Right.
They tend to want to follow it.
And they are. And he could win, as I told Karl Rove very gently last night. Trump could win Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. Bing, bing, bing. So, I mean, to dismiss him as somebody who you know, doesn't have the credibility, that's foolish.
I think that a lot of people who thought that he could never win the nomination are coming to the realization that he actually could.
It's possible.
It is.
Not.
But it is still a little bit early.
Not a lot.
And you saw Ted Cruz in Iowa is already
yeah, Cruz is coming up in Iowa, but Trump has really captured something.
Something.
And the Republican Party has got to kind of
And they
walk
have to
this line.
understand that what Ellison was saying is that is what the Democrats are going to say, is that they're going to paint Republicans with a broad brush. But that is actually going to be true of any of them.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Is World War getting closer? That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. This morning in Turkey, Russian fighter jets shot out of the sky by the Turkish military. There is bad blood between Turkey, a member of NATO, and Russia over the Syrian tyrant Assad. Turkey wants him out. Russia's propping him up as Putin has sent planes and troops into Syria to destroy anti-Assad forces. The chaos we are seeing in the Middle East is now reaching critical mass, with ISIS launching terror attacks directed from Syria and Russia now destroying American-supported assets on the ground. A world war, while not probable, is not inconceivable. Today, President Obama met with French President Hollande in Washington for some tough talk about the ISIS terror attack in Paris.
It is a scourge that threatens all of us. And that's why, for more than a year, the United States, France, and our coalition of some 65 nations have been united in one mission: to destroy these ISIL terrorists and defeat their vile ideology.
So let's get this on the record. For more than a year, according to President Obama, 65 countries have been actively trying to defeat ISIS. 65. Yet the savages still hold major cities in Iraq, have a command and control center in Raqqa, Syria, and are fanning out all over the world to kill innocent people. So you might say 65 nations are losing the fight against ISIS. Or am I wrong? Anyone hoping for a robust anti-ISIS campaign announcement today was surely disappointed. The two presidents talked and talked and talked some more. Nothing concrete announced. No NATO declaration of war, no strategy on the ground, no new proposals. If ISIS was watching that press conference, they may have nodded off. Talking Points believes the solution to the Syrian ISIS situation lies in NATO declaring war on the terror group, mounting a ground force that would confront the savages where they live, and establishing safe zones inside Syria and Iraq where refugees could be protected so they wouldn't have to go all over the world. Surely the 28 NATO countries could accomplish that, surely, aided by other concerned nations around the world. But to put together that kind of a strategy requires leadership and muscle. The French president, who wants the action, doesn't have enough juice to do it alone, and President Obama is MIA on the NATO issue. So here's what's likely to happen. The ISIS killers will continue to ride out the bombings, will continue to export terror, and will continue to laugh at the weakness of the West. Only after ISIS attacks America will anything change. Weekdays at Bernie segment tonight, the debate over Syrian refugees. Some commentators are comparing the situation to the Japanese internment camps during World War II.
President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was commander-in-chief in 1938 who signed the executive order to intern Japanese Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It was also under his watch that we denied a safe haven to Jewish refugees fleeing the horrors of Nazi violence.
Joining us now from Miami, the purveyor, BernardGoldberg.com, Mr. Goldberg. So there is great sympathy on the left for the Syrian refugees. Of course, I solved the problem by the NATO situation. I don't want to belabor that, but, you know, it's not hard to set up safe zones inside Syria and Iraq to protect these people. But, again, President Obama doesn't seem to want to do that. However, the reason the press is sympathizing with the Syrian refugees is because that's the modus operandi of liberal thought. You feel sorry for the downtrodden, right?
That's exactly right. Let's take what Harry Smith said about this supposed analogy between interning Japanese Americans during World War II and not letting Jews in who were trying to escape Nazi Germany on the one hand, and opposition to Syrian refugees on the other. They're both supposedly based on irrational fear, but it doesn't hold up. Franklin Roosevelt did not intern Italian Americans. He did not intern German Americans, even though we were at war with both Italy and Germany. He only interned Japanese Americans, and let's emphasize they were Americans, because they weren't white. It was racism, and that was irrational. Roosevelt wasn't concerned that the Nazis were trying to sneak Nazis into this country along with Jewish children during the war. It was that we didn't want Jews in this country. America was a largely anti-Semitic country in the 40s, and that's what that was about. That was irrational. But it is not irrational to be concerned about ISIS sneaking terrorists in to this country along with the refugees. It is not crazy. It's a legitimate concern. So I personally, the analogy is historically
invalid comparison is what they say in philosophy class.
Yes, and intellectually lame, and in my personal view, it's obscene also.
All right, why is it obscene? I mean, Harry Smith is, he's a liberal man, but he's not a bomb thrower. I mean, why would you say it would be obscene?
Well, to compare, we round up Japanese Americans. By the way, I was based in California in the 70s. I interviewed these people, and I interviewed their children, and I've been to the camps. What we did to them was wrong, very, very wrong. Comparing that with a legitimate concern about what ISIS may do with the Syrian refugees. They did it in France, they did it in Paris. Why wouldn't they at least try to do it in America? That is a bad, bad analogy.
Okay, I agree it's bad, but I don't think he meant anything other. I think it was an invalid comparison based on historical fact. I think you were absolutely right. But isn't there, in your opinion, a hysteria that takes hold? And on the right,
yes,
too. You see it on the right sometimes on these issues. You get hysterical about it. You know, if you oppose or you moderate or you're not accepting of these poor people who are downtrodden and threatened, and you're an evil person, you know, that kind of
thing. Exactly. We're not just wrong.
Yeah, we're
evil. You're absolutely right. Look, here's how I see it. Starting with President Obama, liberals starting with President Obama, and then joined by his pals in the media, Harry Smith and many others, are turning this debate into a morality play. And of course, they're the moral ones because they want to help people who need help. And conservatives, of course, are the immoral ones, except it isn't just conservatives who are against allowing 10,000 Syrian refugees in by the end of next year. It's also 53% of the American people, according to that poll last week. It's also 47 Democrats. These aren't conservatives.
Yeah, they
These
voted.
are 47 Democrats in the House who are against it. So if it's a decision between self-righteous morality on the one hand and security on the other, the American people have already voted, and they're voting for security.